actually. Before we start, I'd just like to remind members of a few housekeeping rules. Members are reminded that by being present at the meeting, they are in attendance and the usual rules of conduct apply. Please note that the meeting is being live streamed. Microphones should be on mute at all times unless speaking. And please, when you are speaking, when you do have your video on as well, if there could be a suitable or a blurred background. And just before we do start, just the usual way that we start off, we get councillors, members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to introduce themselves. And excuse me, sorry. And if we can have our videos off, I, as a chair, would only have my video on. Thank you. So if we can start off by councillors introducing themselves. So I'm Councillor Susan Erbil. I'm the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, as I've said. Now I will just start by introducing committee members. Achilles, would you like, Councillor Georgia, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you.
I know it's just the usual practice for members to see who's present at the meeting.
No, of course. I'll just put my camera on just for a second just to introduce myself. I'm Achilles Georgiou. I'm a councillor for Bowes and also the chair of the Children's Services Scrutiny Panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Achilles. And Councillor Smith.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Edward Smith. I'm a member for Cot Foster's Ward, and I'm also the chair of the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Panel.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And Councillor Lee David Sanders.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Lee David Sanders. I'm a councillor for Highlands Ward, and I'm the chair of Crime Scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Has Yusuf.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I apologise for my background? I'm afraid these technical issues mean I'm stuck with it for the time being. Anyway, I'm Councillor Has Yusuf from Chase Ward. I'm also the chair of the Environment and Climate Action Scrutiny Panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elif Erbil.
Hi, can everyone see me and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Councillor Elif Erbil, and my area of ward is Lock, and I'm also the chair for Housing Scrutiny Panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Busan Demirel.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Birsen Demirel, member for Enfield Lock Ward. I'm also chair of Finance and Performance Scrutiny Panel. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have our Vice Chair, Councillor Margaret Greer. So sorry, Margaret.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Susan. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Margaret Greer, and I am, as Susan said, Vice Chair of Overview and Scrutiny. I'm a member of the Lower Edmonton Ward, and I'm also the chair of the Regeneration and Economic Development Scrutiny Panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have had an introduction of all the councillors that are members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and now I'd like to ask, there's no apologies because all members are present. Are there any declaration of interest? I assume that is no. So we move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on 15th of September. Are there any comments to be made on this item?
If I may, please, Chair, it's item 10 point Roman numeral 7, and that's, if you recall, I in the meeting I sent an email with a document to everybody. The minute says that the document was not accepted by yourself. I must admit, I don't remember that. You might have said that. I don't recall it. But however, the point which I'd like to raise is that the minute as it reads at the moment is inconsistent with the minute that went to, and the paper, I should say, that went to Cabinet following the scrutiny minutes, following the scrutiny meeting, which in a document from the leader and the programme director for Meridian Water accepted that a document by me had been actually tabled at the OSC meeting. So I think if you leave this minute the way it is, to say that it wasn't accepted, is a contradiction to the document that went to cabinet. So I think it should 10.7 needs to change somehow to reflect the fact that this document was sent to everybody, and indeed people have opened it and read it and have acted upon it.
Okay, we could note that down for 10.7, but I think if Jeremy, do you want to add on to that, or?
I think, Chair, if you leave that one with me to pick up outside the meeting, and if there is any issue, I will email all members of the committee separately. So if members are minded to accept the minutes subject to me clarifying that point, I think that would be the best way to do it, rather than try and do it by committee, as they say.
Yeah.
That's fine. Can we just at least note that I raised it for this at this meeting, then, please?
Yeah, it would.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chair, if I may, sorry for speaking. I do believe there is another error in the minutes, and this is not a deliberate error, I assure you. At item 9.7, 9.7, we refer to Councillor Youssef as vice chair of the housing scrutiny panel, and I believe it should be vice chair.
Yes, I was about to comment on that. As you can see, I haven't got any hair, vice or not.
Okay, I think that's just the letter missing, obviously. Okay, thank you, Jeremy. That is all noted. Okay, so if that's subject to what Jeremy has said, then we could move on to item 4. And that is, so we have, just before we do begin our meeting, we have 2 items, main items on the agenda today, and I aim to aim to even out these timing and allow 1 hour for each item, so it can be a fair way to approach the agenda as well, and it will give enough time for members to question on each item that we do have. So I just wanted to ask, because item 4 is the petition received, if the lead petitioner, who is Mr. Rowland, is he on the call? He was on the call earlier, just to come.
I'm right here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much, Roland. So the petition that we have received is, so I'll just read out how it's been, as members and, public that's watching can read as well. So the petition is, the subject is, petition for all works under the Bowes Primary School and surrounding street quieter neighbourhood plan to be halted until there has been a full consultation with local residents and engagement with Haringey Council and Transport for London. So that's the petition that we have received, and today members would be receiving the petition, and we will be noting the issues that we see or the questions that we have, and as there would be no voting on the petition itself, but it will be either for noting, or if the committee feels that there is to be a recommendation made, for us to make a recommendation as a committee, then it would be. But let's see how the petition item goes ahead. And I would just like to remind that the petition lead has 5 minutes to introduce and to speak about the petition, and then the cabinet member has. So I believe Councillor Ian Barnes is also present, and we have officers. So Officer Doug Wilkinson, who this petition falls under, to have a response time of 10 minutes, and then we'll be moving on to members to ask questions. So I wouldn't be speaking further, but I would move this item on to Roland. If you could please, you have 5 minutes. I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm ready to go. Okay, good evening. My name is Roland Hughes. Thank you for allowing me to present this petition from over 1,600 local residents. I'm going to use these 5 minutes to argue that this LTN needs to be removed immediately for a number of reasons. It adds to pollution and congestion in our wider neighbourhood. It reduces the independence of the vulnerable. It provides disincentives to walk and cycle. Planning our daily lives has become a lottery as we are dependent on one entry-exit stretch of the most congested road in the country. For carers, tradespeople, delivery drivers and many others in our community, car use is vital, not just a lifestyle choice. We are a very residential mixed community. 40% of us are BAME. It is a quiet neighbourhood traffic-wise with a couple north to south links across Haringey and Enfield. Otherwise, we are totally bounded by the North Circular and Bounds Green Road. We have no facilities locally for essentials other than a few convenience stores and fast food shops, hardly ideal for healthy diets or reducing obesity. We use high streets in Muswell Hill, Southgate, Wood Green and Palmer's Green for the essentials of life, all of which necessitate round trips which previously ranged from 5.2 to 6.8 kilometres. These areas represent the true extent of our neighbourhood. We shop in Asda in Southgate or Marks in Muswell Hill, go to the dentist or place of worship in Wood Green, and so on. Walking or cycling around Bowes takes us nowhere, but instead entraps us in a rather sad version of the Truman Show. Nor do we have the benefit of an integrated cycle network. Instead, we must negotiate busy, hilly thoroughfares with parked cars and potholed roads, now made worse by displaced traffic. These roads have become even more dangerous and unpleasant for walkers and cyclists as a result. After more than a month of this scheme being operational, the level of displaced traffic is such that Haringey are planning their own LTN, which is an indictment of our scheme in itself. If their LTN goes ahead, our local journeys become more horrendous, and as more traffic will be funneled onto even fewer roads. We are increasingly being imprisoned within our own neighbourhood. Let's now examine a bit more closely the disbenefits of this scheme. 1. Access for emergency services is via a very congested part of the North Circular or Bounds Green Road, both of which are regularly gridlocked and sometimes closed and flooded. 2. There are many new high-density housing developments on this narrow stretch of the North Circular. This scheme will not lower the pollution generated by constant congestion and idling cars. However marginal the impact of our LTN, it gives a message that certain lives do not matter. 3. Bowes School infant playground faces directly onto the North Circular, the wall of which is just 3.3 metres from the carriageway. How does this scheme help the health and well-being of our children? 4. The Metropolitan Police has pointed out to the council that dead-end streets may encourage scooter and pedestrian crime as police cars have less easy access. Such incidents have already happened. Walking home from the tube on dark winter nights becomes a riskier affair. 5. The disabled, elderly and vulnerable face greater barriers to receiving home deliveries for essential supplies, visits from carers and health workers and relatives. The fallback defence of LTN advocates is always pollution reduction, but this assertion needs to be backed by robust empirical evidence. We would have expected to see by now some hard data that sets out the tangible benefits of the scheme, as well as a methodology that shows how before and after positions are to be measured. Any future collection of data must focus on the areas surrounding our scheme that are affected by the displacement, not our newly created dead-end roads. Why would reducing traffic in our neighbourhood be deemed success if our daily lives are so detrimentally affected? The council needs to start again and try to understand how our daily lives work and what determines our mode of travel. We need a joined-up solution to traffic problems involving TfL and Haringey. In conclusion, the traffic misfortunes of Warwick Road residents have been used
Just a minute
to
left,
justify
thank you.
a far-reaching scheme that has caused unnecessary friction in the community. It benefits a vocal minority at the expense of the rest of us. To quote Councillor Barnes, it is the job of the council to represent the best interests of all its residents. Quieter neighbourhoods are not the same as LTNs. We did not vote in Labour for car reduction schemes that undermine our lives and livelihoods. Winning all our hearts and minds is essential if this council wants to maintain the support and confidence of its communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Roland. Thank you for putting your brief petition. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to give Councillor Barnes the chance to respond. Councillor Barnes, you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all well and staying safe. I'm going to try not to take up the full 10 minutes with this, but what I'd like to do is break down my response to the petition and into the following sections, if I may. A quick reminder of how this Bowes low traffic neighbourhood works and how it came about, the petition itself, the organisation behind the petition, and finally a summary and details of a consultation going forward. So in very simple terms, a low traffic neighbourhood, or LTN, works by filtering the ends of certain roads in an area to stop rat runners crisscrossing that area, in the hope that this ultimately encourages drivers out of their cars, onto foot, cycle or public transport for short journeys. The filters for a trial like this take the shape of planters that continue to allow pedestrians or cycles through, or camera enforced filters that are requested by the emergency services so they can drive through unimpeded. Bowes is an area that's been plagued with through traffic for a long time, mainly due to tens of thousands of vehicles a week cutting off a huge corner of the North Circular Road. For the last 10 years, phone apps such as Waze have increasingly directed vehicles away from main roads and through residential neighbourhoods that shouldn't be used as a pressure valve because there are too many vehicles on our roads. In response to concerns about traffic in Bowes, ward councillors, Councillors Brett, Councillor Georgiou, who's with us tonight, and Councillor Chiba, have lobbied for a solution for many, many years. Our MP Bambos Charalambos presented a petition to Parliament in 2018 calling for bold action from Enfield Council on this issue. It's worth noting that 40% of Bowes residents don't own a car, often the less well-off families, and yet they're made to suffer awful air quality from this through traffic. Bowes is also well served with public transport, having several bus services and even a Piccadilly line tube station. Low traffic neighbourhoods in London, particularly in Waltham Forest, have been successful in encouraging people to think twice about their short cart journeys. 35% of journeys in London are under 2 kilometres, which is about a 15-minute walk. We'd like drivers who are able to consider walking or cycling, consolidating car trips, car sharing with other car owning family members, and travelling at non-peak times, or simply not making the journey at all. This should lead to traffic evaporation and has been documented in several reports by various traffic experts. These schemes do take time to bed in and for behavioural change to take place, and this ultimately leads to cleaner air, improved safety on roads, helps to fight obesity, and ultimately climate change. 39% of our borough's emissions being from our roads. Low traffic neighbourhoods are a policy of this administration and now official government policy. I'm highly critical of this government, but on this particular issue, it's 100% correct, and indeed the government funded this Bowes LTM with its Emergency Active Travel Fund. The government gave us only 8 weeks to implement this LTN, otherwise funding would be clawed back and we would jeopardise our chances of further funding in the next round, which may be significantly larger. This would be hugely beneficial for the entire borough, and one of our next LTNs moves into Edmonton and the East. 8 weeks is an incredibly short time to design a scheme, liaise with ward councillors, our MP, Haringey, and the emergency services, and then order the filters and implement the scheme as a live trial with full consultation. But the government's haste is aimed at offering increased space to pedestrians and cyclists during COVID, including those who have taken to cycling or walking during the lockdown. I believe the government is right to aim for a green recovery following the damaging effects of this virus, which is now in its second wave. So just moving on to the petition itself, I was disappointed when I first saw the petition flyer because I immediately recognised it would scare residents in Bowes and leave them confused and fearful. It contained misinformation, and I'm just going to give 3 examples. The first one, to quote, Enfield Council is planning to seal off the local access roads between the Bowes area and the Bounds Green Road. Now, this induced the most panic. I had residents contacting me worried that both ends of their roads were to be sealed off, meaning they couldn't enter with their car at all. Nothing has been sealed off. As described, filters have been added in various locations, and all roads are fully accessible. Second example, to quote, York Road, Upper Maidstone Road and Warwick Road will be closed to cars heading to and from Bounds Green Road. Again, this unnecessarily worried residents because any vehicle can still reach Bounds Green Road via different routes. And the final example, the aim of this petition is to halt the proposed works until the council have engaged with the local community, TfL and Haringey Council. As previously mentioned, there's been engagement with residents over many, many years on the traffic issues through ward councillors, petitions, a perception survey, and a COVID-19 street space online consultation, all of which have identified through traffic as a serious problem in Bowes. And we just cannot install a scheme like this without first engaging with TfL, Haringey and the emergency services, which we did extensively. We now have a 6-month live consultation, and I hope that all residents will feed back to the council, positive or negative, as this will help inform amendments and the ultimate fate of the scheme. And I've contacted several groups in the area to arrange a virtual meeting so that I can personally receive feedback once the scheme has had a chance to bed in. So just turning to the organisation behind the petition, Mr. Hughes is a member of it, the Broomfield Homeowners and Residents Association. It's known as BORA. So this is a residents association that has a section on their website under local campaigns called Too Much Traffic. So they do recognise there's been a problem for a long time. And it should be noted that BORA's own 2019 survey of members' interests highlighted extensive traffic and the environment as one of the top categories of concern. So this petition appears to be in direct odds with their own survey. BORA usually has an AGM in May or June, but this year sidestepped having a virtual AGM, which has angered members because, like any residents association, naturally there are some for this scheme and there are others against. I've been contacted by members of BORA who are furious about the failure to engage with its membership before adopting this anti-LTN position. It's now become apparent as well that the BORA committee has chosen to exclude a number of members who support the LTN from their round-robin email updates. And I was approached yesterday by 19 members of BORA who sent me an email. They asked Mr. Hughes as well, I believe, to read this out, but he's chosen not to tonight. In their statement, the 19 members expressed their support for a trial and to quote, "We are already seeing real positive change, greatly reduced traffic levels, safer streets for school runs, cleaner air, much less noise, vastly more cycling, lower stress levels and less road rage." They state that a course more befitting to a residents' association would have been to develop a balanced subcommittee to look at the pros and cons of such an important issue, as provided for in the BORA Constitution, to consult members and to represent the full range of views. We hope that the association will move quickly to return to a balanced and responsible position, sensitive to the diversity of views on the subject. So finally, Chair, just to summarise, it was unfortunate that the petition scared and worried the residents of Bowes, and disappointing that not once does the petition mention the potential benefits for the area of increased safety for pedestrians, particularly during COVID, improved air quality, obesity, and a positive contribution to our fight against climate change. I made a video to try to counter the misinformation, and of course I continue to provide accurate information in the replies to the many emails I receive from residents. There are just over 1,500 signatures in the petition out of a population of 7,200 people in this low traffic neighbourhood, sometimes 4 or 5 signatures from the same household. And sadly, there are many signatures from roads that have already been filtered from through traffic in recent years, like Evesham, Hardwick and Stanley. These roads already benefit from a life free from rat running, and it's hard to understand why they seek to deny other roads in their community the same benefit. And then there are signatures in the petition from as far afield as Highlands. If a traffic scheme in Highlands was halted because of an objection from someone in Bowes, then I would assume that local ward councillors would rightly be up in arms. But given all of this, we absolutely do recognise that all residents of Bowes deserve to have their voice heard, and that is why we have a live 6-month consultation which will allow people to suggest amendments and to help shape a scheme that works for all residents in the area. Evidence suggests that LTNs need 3 to 6 months to bed in to begin to see driver behavioural change happening, particularly on the perimeter roads.
30 seconds, Councillor
I recognise that no one likes change, but when 1 in 20 deaths in Enfield are connected to air pollution, obesity in children is a significant issue, and 39% of our greenhouse gases are from our roads, then we must act. And in Bowes, this happens to be under government guidance and government funding. If we don't, then we're just kicking the traffic problems and health issues onto future generations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Thank you for the, how do I say, in-depth provided by yourselves. Okay, just before we do move on to members, I have a few questions as chair before I do open it up to members. And the question that actually, Councillor Barnes, you kind of picked up on about the signatures. I understand there has been, just to reiterate on the signatures, that approximately 1,587 signatures, and of them being 1,562 verified signatures. It's just the petition was the petition open to all residents of Enfield, or were most of the signatures received from Bowes? I heard you did mention that there was signatures received from Highlands, and I'm just curious on to how who reacted to the petition and what the areas were that actually signed the petition, because it is quite important to know who is signing. That's one of my questions. And just another question on consultation. So there is a 6-month live consultation which you mentioned, but I understand there was an 8-week period to implement it due to government funding, and quick action had to be taken, which I understand. But within that 8 weeks, what consultations were made? Could you specify on that? If that's, and they're my 2 questions, Councillor Barnes.
Okay, Chair.
Thank you.
No problem at all. So, I find it. I do find it unusual that a petition like this is open to all of the residents of Enfield, because, as I say, the vast majority of the signatures in the petition are from Bowes and Southgate Green, which are involved in the low traffic neighbourhood. But signatures have been allowed from, like I say, as far afield as Highlands and also Palmer's Green. Now, you could argue that local changes to roads, why should someone in Highlands, be able to have a say in that? But that's a debate for a different day, really. So, as I say, the vast majority are from the area, Chair. Your second question was about engagement. So, it's an incredibly short amount of time, 8 weeks. We didn't have time for a consultation. That's why we have gone for a live consultation, which will happen, which is open now, Chair. So anybody is free to enter any thoughts they have into that. The officers, just to give you a comparison, this was installed in 8 weeks. I mean, the officers were literally working around the clock. We have another low traffic neighbourhood in Enfield that has taken 8 to 9 months to install. So, the fact that we had to plan it, install it, engage with stakeholders meant that we weren't able to have the engagement we'd like. But like I say, there's a clear history of engagement. We did a perception survey that very much strongly dictated that there are very bad traffic issues in the area with regards to rat runners and through traffic. And we did a COVID street map where people could pin their thoughts across the whole borough, really, about where they think social distancing really needs to be concentrated. And of course, like I said, Bowes councillors have been engaged for many, many years on this issue, and the MP took a petition to Parliament. So there's been a huge amount of engagement, and we hope that will continue with this live consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. From what I understand, that previous engagement has fed into the LTN in Bowes. Doug, did you have anything to add on?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just for the benefit of everybody, Doug Wilkinson, Director of Environment. It was just to add to that sort of 8-week period of engagement. It was mentioned in the petition about engaging with emergency services and Haringey and TfL. Of course, there's a statutory obligation for us to consult with emergency services when we put traffic schemes in. So within that 8-week period, notwithstanding previous conversations over many years that Councillor Barnes alludes to around traffic issues in the area, in that 8-week period, we were consulting with the emergency services to talk through what the design might look like, how it would work for them. We also engaged with Haringey Council, and that was with both elected members, the ward members, bordering on Bowes, and also the technical officers within Haringey Council, so that we could understand the impacts, because clearly it's not just about Bowes when we managed the traffic network. So there was a lot of engagement with Haringey, both at a political level and an officer technical level. And also, again, mentioned in the petition with TfL, you know, anything we do within our traffic network, our road network, we always have to engage with TfL because there is impacts, there's broader impacts, and equally we've got a really good relationship with TfL, and it works well to understand what we're doing, what we're proposing to do, and how that impacts on them, and have they got any plans that may impact on us too. So it was just really to support the information that Councillor Barnes has mentioned earlier in his statement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Doug. Just touching on that, about the emergency services, there is a statutory obligation. You said, what was the response? If you can, I understand there has been engagement with other Haringey Council, you said the technical team and emergency services, TfL. What is the general? If you can briefly just touch upon the brief responses that you received, because I think it's quite important for the members to know and the committee to know what the general feel was to the LTN.
Yeah.
Sorry, Doug. Thank you.
So can I say something? I don't know, Doug, whether you want to reply to that or Richard, but this is slightly tangential to your question, Chair. But I know a lot of people have been concerned about emergency services, and there's genuine concern. People want to feel safe, but there's been a certain amount of weaponization of the emergency services, which has been really unpleasant. And I think it firstly shows a lack of faith in the emergency services themselves to actually somehow tolerate a scheme that we've implemented that would endanger life. And I think secondly, it also shows a lack of faith in our officers that somehow, the suggestions that they would try to hoodwink the emergency services or, so I'm not trying to imply in any way that you're suggesting that, Chair, but, that has been going around and around, and just one more thing before I hand over. I think it's really important to say that the Chief Operating Officer of the London Ambulance Service, Kadir Mia, publicly stated on the 29th of September, we are not aware of any LTNs that have led to any patient safety concerns or any significant delays, So, for the head of the ambulance service to come out and say that, I think is a really, it's a big statement to make. Obviously, they will continue to monitor the situation, and we will continue to listen to the emergency services because obviously that's what we do. For a bit more detail, so I'll hand over to yourself, Doug, or to Richard.
I'll pick up a little bit, Councillor Barnes, if I may, and then I think Richard is probably a good person to give you just that exact detail relating to our engagement with the emergency services. But I think Councillor Barnes makes a good point highlighting the London-wide approach from the London Ambulance Service there, and I think that's very useful for us to understand, and I think it's very helpful. And what that does is that helps us understand that the engagement that we have with the emergency services is part of the design. So they sit down with our officers and they look at the street layout and work out, and they understand the direction of travel across the whole of London with regards to trying to reduce the number of private car journeys on the city's roads, not just Enfields, not just Bows, but the cities. So they understand the direction of travel, and they're prepared and want to work with London boroughs to make it work for them too. So it's really helpful, the engagement that we have with them to design the layout, and that's where we come to agree, where we have the modal filters in street, and where we have those points which emergency vehicles can pass through, and that's part of the process. If I hand you over, Chair, to Richard, he can probably answer the original question you asked around what was their initial response, or what was their response.
Okay, thank you very much, Doug. Richard, yeah, thank you very much. If you could just...
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my name's Richard Easton. I'm the Healthy Streets Programme Director. I don't want to add too much more because I think it's been covered. But there is a design process that we go through. So when we start to develop a scheme, we share that with the emergency services. There is a process of iteration. So it may be that on our first cut, they do have concerns, and they will raise those with us, and then that's part of the dialogue to then evolve the design to respond to those. Particularly with the London Ambulance Service, the scheme has reduced the width restriction on Warwick Road, which has been a sort of concern previously for the London Ambulance Service. So they haven't previously been able to pass directly through Warwick Road, and that's because the London Ambulance Service and the police have made a similar sort of London-wide operational decision that they don't carry keys for those type of closures. They prefer to understand what are the clear strategic routes that they need to use, and then they use those. So we're working really collaboratively with them, and their feedback as to where they want to be able to continue to pass through, and where therefore we may need to include closures on those routes. Then we take the approach at their request of using the camera controlled closures. So yeah, in summary, it's an iterative process. We've got a very constructive relationship with the emergency services, and the way that it ultimately works, at the end of that discussion, do the emergency services have any objections? And if they don't have any objections, they don't raise those objections with us, and then we can proceed to implementation. And that's the case for this scheme.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for answering my questions. My question wasn't to, I didn't aim to, it wasn't related to what's been, I understand there has been a discussion all over, but I did not mean to weaponize or anything. So apologies if it did come across like that.
No,
Sorry.
it didn't share. No, it didn't share. Apologies. I did not mean to imply that whatsoever.
Okay. No, I understood. Don't worry, it's fine. Okay, so that's the questions that I had, and if we can move on to members, if members can indicate that the members that want to speak, if they can indicate themselves, please.
Chair is Councillor Has Yusuf.
Okay, thank you, Has. Edward Smith and Achilles, yeah. Okay, if we can start with Has, if you can take on and ask a question, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, when is the deadline for this 6-month consultation? Because I think it'll be a really good idea to actually make a really sort of robust, sort of campaign to get as many opinions as possible from the whole wider sort of community. Because, as we know, petitions are the democratic right, to people. So I think that was a good idea. It just gives you a sort of an understanding of what local residents think. So at the very least, they should be noted by the council, which I'm sure it has been. Can I just also ask, has there any been consideration to the use of electric cars in the future to these pollution problems that we're going to have? Because that would presumably make things a lot better. I know it's going to take quite a few years before we actually get sort of carbon-free roads. But has that been considered at all? But really, I just think there seems to be a lack of maybe a bit of communication here. So I think if we make a robust sort of effort to get the peace of the wider community there, I think that'd be great. So thank you.
May I respond?
Yes, you can, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Yusuf. Really good questions. So deadline for the consultation, I'll let Richard bring that up in a minute, if I may. He'll have the exact date that's needed. I agree, we absolutely need to get as big a response as we can across the LTN area. Like I say, there are 7,200 residents in this low traffic neighbourhood. The way that they're interacting with it, the way that they feel about it, whether any changes should be made. As I mentioned in my opening speech, as well as the consultation, I am currently booking personal Zoom virtual meetings with different groups in the area, some for, some against, some who are right in the middle. So, I hope that I will get a wide range of opinions from those groups as well. And I want them to be brutally honest about the schemes and to tell us what's working, what's not working. But going back to my opening statement, I hope that Bora engage with their wider membership group, and somehow I would love to see a committee put together within Bora, the Bora Residents Association, who presented this petition, so that they can have a balance of opinions within that committee, not just outright LTN, a balance of opinions so everyone can have their say, which I think is exactly what Councillor Yusuf is alluding to. If I could just move on to Councillor Yusuf's second question. That's concerning electric vehicles. I know that Councillor Yusuf is extremely environmentally minded, as am I, as are several members. Electric vehicles, that is another prong of our attack, really. What we are introducing by March next year, we're going to introduce our first lamppost charging trial. So this will be the ability for electric vehicles to plug into lampposts in order to charge their cars. So we would like to introduce that across a couple of areas. I favour both because I think it would go hand in hand with the low traffic neighbourhoods. So that's certainly something that we have funds for, and I'd look into, and I would like us to pursue that, and hopefully it will be in by March next year. The lamppost charging is something that I think is probably part of the future, because I do worry that these charging posts, if we put them on streets, they're going to take up valuable space on our streets. So just a plug socket in a lamppost will allow vehicles to plug in, charge, and then in the future, if there are electric filling stations, then we can remove that socket and very easily do that. I think that what we have to realise, though, is that electric vehicles are low emission, but there are still particulates, very damaging particulates, that can be inhaled from the brakes, from the tyres. There are also environmental considerations concerning the enormous batteries that these electric vehicles have. So, it definitely is the future, and it's the way we need to go. And the government has recognised this, because they've put in a ban on the sale of internal combustion engines that will come into effect in 2035. But my worry with that is that if you buy a car in 2034, you'll be able to use it for the next 10 years. So it is positive action from the government. They are becoming greener, which is great to see. And yes, I think that's answered Councillor Yusuf's question. I don't know whether Doug or Richard's got anything to add to that. I think that's probably quite extensive.
Okay, if Doug or Richard, if you have anything to add, thank you.
I'll be very brief, Chair. It was just to follow up around the electric vehicles and charging points. I think Councillor Barnes has given the detail on that, but I think it's important to understand that electric vehicles are part of the solution. They're not all of the solution. Ultimately, across London, we need to reduce the number of vehicles on the roads to reduce congestion, so that public transport becomes much more efficient. So it helps us on that journey, but they're not the only solution for the challenges that London and Enfield face. I think Richard can probably add a little bit more, and certainly can answer the question on when the experimental period ends.
Yeah, I'll just focus on that bit. So we put the scheme in, I think was fully implemented on the 11th of September. So we're really looking at March for that 6 months period. It's an experimental period, so it could be that if the trial is amended in the before that time, then that window can move around, because the idea is that you have a period of stability with what the measures that you've got in place, but there is the opportunity to adjust the trial, but that would then influence how long the consultation might run for. I will just add that we're really keen to hear a whole range of different voices. We're going much beyond the statutory requirement for the consultation period. We are promoting that opportunity. We've developed a project page where there's lots of information and making a really readily accessible way that people can feed back their concerns. And within that consultation as well, we've also asked for people's views and feedback on who may agree and support the aims of the project, but may have an idea of a different way of going about it. And it's important that we hear those ideas as well. And indeed, people I can see are already uploading different ideas that we can review. So we will encourage everyone to get involved in that consultation, and we'll continue to promote it. And if people have got ideas of ways that we can do that and increase the level of engagement throughout this period, then we'll absolutely listen to those ideas.
Thank you, Richard. Did Councillor Youssef, did that answer all your questions?
Yes, thank you. Another one would be if after consultation it becomes really, really negative, what do we do then?
I think that could maybe feed in from Councillor Edward Smith's questions, because we're quite time constrained, so we should move on. But Councillor Barnes, you could pick up on that question whilst you're answering back to Councillor Smith. Councillor Edward Smith, if you could put your questions out, if there are a few, if you can give them back to back, and then I assume Councillor Barnes would be more than happy to answer them in one go. Would that be okay?
Yes, no, I prefer to do that, Chair. Thank you. I think it is a pity, however, and we've said this before, we now have 10 minutes really to actually ask questions. We've had, I know, questions from Councillor Youssef, but we've almost run out of time, and that is not really good enough for such an important issue. Anyway, moving on.
As a committee, we are always, open to extend for, a 10 to 15 minutes. So as long as we do put our questions as the committee members, just be ensured that no one would be cut off from their questioning. Okay?
Okay, I do appreciate that, Chair. Thank you. I'm sure that's the right decision. I mean, my first question really is about the principle behind this. I think it's deplorable, really, to have heard from Councillor Barnes that he has criticised the people who brought this petition. 1,600 people have said they're deeply unhappy with this particular consultation process, and I don't think it's right in any shape or form for a council to just dismiss that as these people being some sort of minority interest, or that they haven't followed their own internal processes, or they don't represent the people of Bowes as a whole. So I just wanted to make that comment first. In terms of the principle of this, and this is where I come to my question, if I may, there seems to be no attempt to have considered the trade-off between mobility and the problems, which we all understand, obviously, of intense traffic through suburban roads. The reality is that there are lots of people, old people, young mothers, people who need to go shopping, people who need to go, to local shopping centres, which may be, 2 or 3 miles away, who won't be able to aren't able to walk, aren't able to use a bike, and might struggle with a bus. In creating this sort of draconian approach, could he inform us whether he is, has any sympathy with that point of view with the residents who will struggle, because of the various obstacles that he has placed around the streets of Bowes, and the huge nuisance and worry and concern that all of that will have created. So that's the first question, and it leads into the second question. We are now in a consultation process, a very unusual one in the sense that the residents are being consulted after the first phase of the works have been completed. Leaving that aside, we are now in a consultation process. Will he take any account, because the likelihood is that there will be plenty of opposition to what has occurred, and plenty of opposition to phase 2, because there is a second part to this where more roads will be closed off. How is he going to actually respond to this consultation and assuage some of the mobility problems that I've referred to, if he doesn't actually, is not in any way sympathetic to them, will the consultation basically be a charade which he will then dismiss when it is completed? And my third question is about the emergency services. It's a complex situation. Could somebody, an officer or Councillor Barnes, tell me whether the ambulance service and the police service have agreed strategic routes through this particular area to allow them to access houses if there is an emergency? Because that's the key thing. They don't carry FB keys, as people have said, so they need to have been told and they need to agree what the routes of access are. Has that actually occurred yet? So they're my three questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. If we could move on to the responses. Councillor Barnes, thank you. You're on mute. Yeah, no.
Sorry, I was just trying to get off. First of all, I'd like to take issue with Councillor Smith's completely unfair comments concerning the fact that he accuses me of dismissing the petition. Far from it. I haven't dismissed the petition. What I've said is that the petition is based on misinformation, and it has scared the residents of Bowes, it's worried the residents of Bowes. I responded to that with a video. What I would have liked to have seen is a petition that had all the arguments in it, the pros, the cons, allow people to make up their own minds, and this would have stemmed, as I've said, from a Borough committee that had a balanced representation of people for it, people against it. What Borough have done is taken an anti-LTN, anti-low traffic neighbourhood stance from the outset. They've projected that onto their petition and they've sent it out into the world. So, yeah, frankly, I haven't dismissed it whatsoever. All I've said is I would like people to look at the facts, look at the information, you know, try to make up their own minds, and then please take part in our consultation, which is open for the next 6 months. On the second issue. So the second question was concerning mobility. Of course, we recognise that some people have to use their car. I mean, without doubt, we talk to people on email. I talk to people on the phone who have to use their car. What I've tried to impress on them, though, is that ultimately our hope, and I'm going to allow Richard to just talk about the EQIA in a minute, the equality assessment. But what our hope is that if we can persuade the people who are able-bodied to, you know, like I've said, walk, cycle, consolidate trips, then hopefully that will allow clearer roads for the people who have to use their car, you know, the disabled or whoever it may be. That is our ultimate aim, because mark my words, there are 119,000 cars in Enfield. There are 24,000 cars coming in the next 2 decades. If you think it's congested now, you ain't seen nothing yet. What's coming ahead of us is going to be complete gridlock. I was looking at the figures this afternoon as well. In 1970, there were 13 million cars in the UK. In 2020, there are 40 million cars. You know, our streets are filling up with cars. They are overflowing from main roads into residential areas, causing a danger to pedestrians in residential areas where there are less crossings, there are more blind bends. So consequently, what I'm saying is this reduction in small journeys, 2 kilometres or less, which can take 15 minutes to walk, it's not just going to benefit everybody with regards to air quality, climate change. It's also going to benefit those people who have to use their cars, because we're trying to free up the roads for them in the future. So that's that. I'll let Richard talk about the EQIA if I may in a minute, Chair, but I'll just finish the final point from Councillor Smith, which Richard will want to pick up on as well, I'm sure. The emergency service and agreed routes. Yes, we did. We agreed routes with the emergency services, which meant that they would have unhindered passage on particular strategic routes that they thought were important for them to access areas. So, you know, within the Bowes area, that was Warwick Road. So Warwick Road, the entrance there, instead of using planters and a bollard, which is what we've used on the other roads, to filter the road so only cyclists and pedestrians can go through, what we've done is put in a camera at great expense so that the ambulance service can drive straight through that camera. All emergency services can drive through that camera. So, that we will comply with emergency services requests because we would be foolish not to. So that camera has been put in place for that reason. I'll allow Richard just to pick up, if I may, on the EQIA and maybe just to talk a little bit more about the emergency service agreement with regards to strategic routes, if I may.
Thanks, Councillor. Thanks, Chair. I'll be very brief. We've published an equalities impact assessment that's on the project page. The equalities impact assessment is a dynamic process. We've got to continue to consider the impacts on people with the protected characteristics, and as part of the consultation, we're asking specific questions so that people can articulate, how they feel the scheme is impacting them. In terms of the emergency services, just as Councillor Barnes has said, I personally spoke with both the police and the London Ambulance Service about the strategic routes, and that's been discussed with them, and they've agreed the routes that we've settled on.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. And I think Edward, did that answer your questions briefly, or to an extent that you would say?
It answered my questions to an extent, so I'm grateful for that. I just want to put to bed one particular thing that keeps on being mentioned about the residents not being fully informed of the proposals, and therefore they were scared by the wording of the petition. I think the council did put out on the 28th of September what is in fact an extremely clear explanation of what the proposals are and what was going to happen with an attached map. So residents only had to look at the council letter on the subject to find out, what was involved. So I don't think you can argue that the residents have been misled by the petition. Thank you.
If I could respond to that quickly, Chair. If only
Very
residents,
briefly, thank you.
it's 30 seconds. If only residents would look at all of our communication, I would be hugely relieved. But unfortunately, they don't. So, with regards to that issue, it's a bit of a moot point.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes, and thank you, Councillor Smith. Now we have Councillor Achilles Giorgio, who would like to put his questions forward. Thank you, Achilles. If we can do the same way as how Edward has, it'll kind of make, ease the procedure. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. As people may know, I am one of the councillors for Bowes, and indeed trying to relieve the problems that we have in Warwick Road and Brownlow Road has been a very difficult issue, and various things have been spoken about and tried. We now have this scheme. I don't know if it's the right scheme. People have an opportunity to stays as it is, whether it's amended in some way or other, or indeed is done away with completely, because I think there are three options there. The three options are there. Certainly, I'd agree with what Ian is saying. We do need to see a change in terms of modal traffic and the way move around. And I was very happy previously to support the Mini Holland scheme, where we introduced cycle lanes and so on. And long may we introduce them, and long may people actually use them. I don't think we should get het up about number of people who have signed particular petitions or not. The fact is, 1,500 plus people have signed this petition. The fact that some of them do not live in Bowes, I think we should say, okay, fine. There may be good reason for someone who lives in Highlands to actually visit Bowes. They may have a parent there, they may have someone that they're caring for there. So they should have a right to sign a petition, and indeed for us to hear their views. And because if we get into numbers, then you get into the whole issue. When the perception survey was done in March, 263 people responded to this, whereas now we've got 1,500 plus. I don't think we should get het up into that. It is important that we have a consultation, and I think that if we had had a pre-installation consultation, if that had been possible for phase one, then a lot of the problems that we are seeing now in terms of how some members of Bowes or some people living in Bowes feel about this would have been overcome. I understand that we were on a short time frame, that the council was on a short time frame that was dictated to by government, and there is an opportunity now for people to have their views, and I hope people do put forward their views. But as Edward Smith said, there are two phases to this scheme. Phase one, £100,000 came from government, and that has been implemented, and there is this consultation for 6 months. There is a phase two. We don't know whether phase two will be funded yet, but the plans are there for phase two. And I think there is a good opportunity for pre-installation consultation on phase two. And in part, I do believe that's taking place with the current questionnaire. It asks people about what they believe about a bus gate in Brownlow Road. I think it should go further. It should ask people about their views on a possible closure between Goring Road and Westbury. I think that's important, and people need to be heard about that. I think just on the consultation, just keeping on the consultation, one of my concerns, and I've raised this with officers, is how are we consulting with people who are not able, don't have access to local to online media? How are we consulting people such as blue badge holders? There are a number of blue badge holders in the area. We need to get to them. How are we consulting with people who are carers or who need to be cared for, I should say? And what is the impact upon them? So I think we need all this consultation. Sorry? So I think we
Councillor Gray, if you can turn off your camera, thank you.
I think that's vitally important in terms of how we hear, how we reach out to people who are not online, and how we do that. And it would be interesting to hear from Richard in terms of how that might be happening. I think also just on the emergency services, and by no means do I wish to weaponize this in any way whatsoever, but I do think some myths, possible myths, need to be dispelled, and so hence why I'm raising them. I think one of the points that keeps making the social media and is going around is that the ambulance service doesn't carry keys, and whether that is a detriment to and what the impact that is in terms of the emergency services. The ambulance services trying to reach people via closed roads, and two roads are closed off, York and Maidstone. What does that mean? There is also letters going around which say that there was correspondence earlier on with the ambulance service in Edmonton, where they raised some objections to the emergency services, the ambulance service, the Edmonton group manager being able to access some of these areas. So I think that would be useful just to clear it up. I think likewise with the police, earlier on there was correspondence from the designing out crime officer, which made the point that about road closures such as these the impact could be on crime, which I think is again worth just dispelling those if that's the case. So, and that's why I raised them, so we can't just get them out of the way. I think going forward, I think for me it's how the scheme is evaluated, and I'm not clear from what I have seen how the scheme will be evaluated, because while on the website and in the questionnaire that's been put forward, it says that we looked at in terms of number of traffic and so on, and what the impact is, and the pollution levels and so on. What we don't have, and the impact on neighbouring roads, what we don't have are any figures. No figures have been set. Targets have been set to say the level of traffic within phase one, the roads in phase one will go down by X. The level of pollution in phase one area will go by X. And for me, having targets, having data, having figures is very important in deciding in 6 months' time what the council will do. And unless you've actually set those targets, then how do you know what you're going to do? And in keeping with that, I think what's very important is that the scheme is pushing traffic onto the North Circular Road. We are seeing more traffic in such as Bounds Green Road.
I think just to be sorry to interrupt. It's just to be a bit more specific on the questions, because I think it's for it to be easier for response as well. Because I understand there is a lot of of course as a ward councillor, which you would have more interest, but it's just
on Brownlow Road, in Bounds Green Road, in Durnsford Road, in Nightingale, and those latter are in Haringey, but there is an impact there, and we are seeing increased traffic there. One of the arguments has been is that there will be car evaporation. I think, well, what are the figures that will tell us whether there is car evaporation or not, and where that's happening? And I think finally, if phase 2 funding doesn't happen, then what will the council do? Because it's quite likely that the situation in Brownlow Road, the number of cars in Brownlow Road will increase unless there is some level of mitigation that is put in for Brownlow Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giorgio. Just to say the hour has passed for this item, and I propose that we extend it for 10 minutes because there are members that wish to ask questions, and to be fair on them, I'd like to extend for 10 minutes. If that's agreed, can members say agreed, please? Thank you.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes,
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes, if I can pass on to you.
Yeah.
I know it was quite
Sure.
intensive.
It was. Yeah. I'm not sure where the questions were in there, but so. I mean, first of all, it's slightly strange because Councillor Georgiou has been part of this implementation. He's been to all the meetings. We've had chats. We've talked about it over and over. There are some questions in there that we can certainly answer, but there are questions in there that he knows the answer to already. So just to begin with, in my long list here, so with regards to the petition, I'm not getting het up about the numbers. I would just like to point out to the committee members, the numbers in relation to the amount of people in the low traffic neighbourhood, which is 7,200. I'd like to point out, that several people in particular households were signing the petition. I'd like to point out that, people from outside the area were signing the petition. I don't particularly agree with his analysis that, someone from Highland should be able to object to a traffic scheme in Bowes, or somebody. When we set up our low traffic neighbourhood in Edmonton, can you imagine people from Palmer's Green, objecting to that, how the residents of Edmonton and the councillors of Edmonton might react to that? So, that is the situation with regards to the council's constitution. And like I say, it's a debate for another time, but, that's my personal viewpoint on it. Plans for phase 2, I think he touched on. Yes, as Councillor Georgiou knows, we've yet to hear from the Secretary of State with regards to the tranche 2 of the Emergency Active Travel Fund. We don't have a plan in place. I don't know where Councillor Georgiou's got that one from. We don't know where the bus gate's going to be. We have that's a bus gate on Brownlow Road itself. We have asked in the consultation that's happening at the moment, which is online. We have asked the question there. Would you, I can't remember the exact wording, forgive me, Chair, but it concerns that bus gate on Brownlow Road. So we are trying to get some information, now that we can use later. But, with regards to a timescale with phase 2, we have absolutely no idea because Mr. Schatz has yet to inform us whether we're getting any funds and what kind of timescale he's going to impose on us. So I think that's phase 2. Okay, so the next thing was Councillor Georgiou asked about people who can't fill it in online. As we told Councillor Georgiou in meetings, what we're hoping to do is do a pop-up in the area where officers will be providing, COVID restrictions allow for it. Officers will be on hand, socially distanced, and anybody who's not able to fill out the consultation online for whatever reasons, perhaps they're disabled, etc., then they will be able to come to that pop-up, and our officers will listen to them, note down their objections or support for the scheme, and that will be included in the consultation. I think Councillor Georgiou then went on to talk about blue badge holders. As we've said to Councillor Georgiou in various meetings, we are trying to figure out or find out, exactly where, people in the area who may be blue badge holders or disabled are, so that we can individually contact them, which is what I'd love to do. We're facing significant GDPR issues with regards to that at the moment, which I hope we can, I hope we can get past those issues. And officers are working really hard to that. But I think that, one-on-one correspondence with disabled people with regards to their particular issues is very important for us to take that into account, and we will action that going forward. So next, Councillor Georgiou touched on the ambulance service in Edmonton. As I say, we're in constant touch with the ambulance service. Richard, I think Richard talks on practically every day from what he says to me. So, as I've said, they were the ones that told us that they would like to see a camera on Warwick Road. That has been done at some expense. There are certain emails floating around. I've seen those online. They're freedom of information requests. They're a snapshot in time. So, they've been, the information request has been made on a certain date, and there are subsequent emails to that. There are other emails that weren't included in that. But let me hand over to Richard now with regards to the ambulance service in Edmonton and that kind of situation, and also Richard can pick up as well, if he may, on the evaluation of the consultation and how that might take place.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. I've seen some of those emails on social media. There was an objection from the London Ambulance Service as during the discussion of the designs. We discussed that with the London Ambulance Service as we were discussing these strategic routes, and that objection was based on sort of perceived increase in potential journey time for the team getting to and from work, and that was a concern. And we acknowledge that schemes like this do mean that some people have to take slightly different routes for those type of journeys, but wasn't an operational objection to the operations of the LAS. In terms of the consultation, people can request paper copies. They can call us or email us, and we can send those out. And on the website, and Councillor mentioned some of the, we have listed out the different factors that we'll consider as part of the consultation, which I won't list them out because I'm conscious of time. They've not got particular metrics set against them. The report that is produced will have to balance out the various bits of data and the analysis, and will provide commentary on how in the round it feels the scheme has performed. It's difficult to identify sort of one key metric. The whole of the data that we collect will build a picture that will form a formal report that will then invite a key decision on, and that decision in itself can then be subject to further scrutiny. That's all, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just quite cautious on the time. I'm worried that members are not going to be asking questions. Councillor Georgia, I hope that has summed up your queries, because there is Councillor Greer who's been waiting quite patiently to ask her question. If that's okay, if Councillor Greer, if you could put forward your question, thank you.
I'll be very quick because okay. So the petition was submitted. I just wanted to ask, in terms of the implementation, and now that this petition is here, is there engagement with? Is it Roland that did the presentation? Was it? Yeah. Is there now going to be that kind of interaction? Because what I see is that this petition is very good in the sense that bringing out some of the issues that have been raised. But I also think it's quite important that we look at the timeline that happened. So there was an implementation that was given at 8 weeks. The 8 weeks is still a trial. Was there going to be this kind of full consultation that we've now got from the 11th of September to 11th of March? And within that, as part of the 7,200 residents that I think Councillor Barnes has mentioned, are we able to consult with them in a different type of way, not just in terms of the website? Because I've looked at the website and it is very detailed in Q&A and some of the vision that has actually been taken place, so people can get a lot of answers from that. But I just want to know where we go from here to actually moving it forward, and not dismissing the queries that have come out of the petition, but how we actually engage with our residents and making sure that we're pulling people along rather than he said, she said, we said. I'm not really into that, and I think we have to have collective responsibility. And I welcome your presentation, Councillor Barnes, and I also think that from the outset, I think Jeremy Chambers did state that any decision would be at the behest of Doug Wilkerson, who's the officer that actually made the decision in terms of implementation. But again, so those are the bits that I'd like to know, where we go to now and how we engage with our residents, making sure that we're moving forward with some of the issues that have been raised with this particular scheme, and the end game of 6 months and how we implement those changes moving forward, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greer. I think, Jeremy, did you want to mention or?
Yeah, if I could, Chair, I'll just pick up the final point raised by Councillor Greer. When the committee has finished debating this matter, they're at liberty to note the petition, take no action, or refer the matter back to the decision maker, and the decision to proceed with an experimental traffic order for the Bows Low traffic neighbourhood was an operational decision taken by Doug Wilkinson, the Director of Environment and Operations. So that was the point I was clarifying to councillors before the meeting went live, and I just thought it'd be useful if I confirm that during the live meeting, and I'll keep quiet now and hand over to Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yes, Councillor Barnes, if you could just respond back. And like I said, we've got another few minutes, which I would like to sum up, and thereon we could conclude the matter. The questions, that will be the end of the questions, because we don't have any other time. There are still officers waiting for the next item, and I really do apologise to the officers that are waiting. Thank you.
Okay, Chair. Firstly, that was an excellent question from Councillor Greer. I know Councillor Greer personally, and I know that she wants residents to have their say. I feel exactly the same. I don't want to give the impression that I was attacking the petition tonight. What I want to say is that I just feel the petition was one-sided. I feel it was full of misinformation, and I wish that Bora had taken into account the other opinions of its residents. Like I've said, maybe formed a committee that could have put its case forward in a balanced petition. So please, don't. I'm not discounting the petition at all. As I said previously, I'm having meetings with these groups. I'm having a one-on-one with a representative of 5 or 6 groups in the area. I would love them to feed back to me at that point, as much information as they can. I will feed that into the consultation. I will speak to officers about that. I'll speak to Doug and Richard about that. And with regards to the consultation, if people can't get online, please request a paper copy, or if you need very specialist help, we will try to get an officer to help you to fill in the consultation, or even take your comments over the phone that can be fed into the consultation. But because of officer time, we would prefer you do it online or on paper. But if there are special needs or such like, then please do let us know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Doug, finally, if you want to make a comment, and then I would like to summarise. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just really to add to Councillor Barnes and to respond to Councillor Greer around consultation when she specifically mentioned engaging with Roland and the group. Of course, we want to engage with Roland and the group and everybody. We're not in the business of excluding people from consultations. We want to hear from everybody and all their views, so that we get a really rounded picture of people's views during this consultation period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just before I do sum up, I understand there are ward councillors who are present, but unfortunately at this meeting, members were the priority to ask questions as it's come to Overview and Scrutiny Committee. But if there are other further questions that members or ward councillors, I understand they will directly contact the officers or Councillor Barnes with their queries.
Chair,
is
sorry,
it
sorry,
quite
Chair,
urgent?
Chair, sorry to interrupt before you sum up. Is it possible for me to move a recommendation based on what various colleagues have said this evening? Is that part of this process?
But, in my sum up, I was actually going to ask if there was a recommendation from the committee, but if I could leave that to the end, if I could just quickly sum up what was discussed, so members of the public can be aware of what was, just to get a summary if they've joined in late. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So just to quickly sum up, we had the lead petitioner, Roland, who did start off the petition. He did mention, I'm just going to touch up on the areas that he did mention. Sorry if I do miss any points, but it was, he did say that one of the points that he said were it's not COVID safe, the congestion caused, it reduces independence of elderly, planning day-to-day life is like lottery, car use is vital, and the diversity of residents, the key link of the North Road, sorry if I missed the word, no facility locally, which limited, and there was a comment on obesity, and there was a comment on, as the Mark Spencer's, sorry, I didn't mean to mention, worship areas, and not everyone could walk or cycle, takes some people nowhere, but it's like a track to some. 1 month that this has been going, and he mentioned that there's been displaced traffic. He mentions key points. He said access to emergency services, high density housing. He mentioned Bose School facing carriageway, and on health and well-being, Metropolitan Police on incidents, disabled and elderly face barriers, and it's hard. So about the data that's given to date, and for council to look at day-to-day lives. That was just a brief of what the lead petitioner mentioned, and Councillor Barnes responded. I'm just going to be quite brief to say that he said the LTM filters ends of certain roads for crisscross for short journeys. There's camera enforced filters. Bose is plagued with through traffic. There was a mention of ways increasing direction to neighbourhoods. Ward councillors lobbied for solution for many years was mentioned, and the local MP has also voted for this in Parliament. Bose has a well-served transport link. Drivers who are able to walk or cycle should be, recommended. And there was a mention of traffic evaporation, cleaner air, and on obesity and climate change, and that the official government policy is on LTNs. There was an 8-week period to implement this due to government funding, and the next LTN, there was a mention of Edmonton, and Councillor Barnes has mentioned that 8 weeks was a short time, and increase space during COVID was mentioned, and sorry, just to mention again, and that there was some certain misinformation in the petition, which Councillor Barnes touched upon certain areas, and that there is a 6-month live consultation, which there will be also virtual meetings, and there was a mention of Bahora. There's a campaigns about too much traffic. There has been previous surveys, and just that petition, Councillor Barnes did mention that the petition may have scared residents, and that, just to reiterate, there is a 6-month consultation ongoing, and there were questions raised by Councillor Has Yusuf on electric vehicles and the deadline of the consultation, which I understand it started from 11th September to March. Now it's till March 2021. It's an experimental period. Councillor Edward Smith asked on the principle behind this and the mobility issue, and the consultation after phase 1, and about questions on emergency services, and Councillor Achilles Giorgio also asked questions on phase 1 and phase 2, especially on the funding, and about the next steps of the scheme. And then Councillor Margaret Greer asked about 7,200 residents, can we consult in any other way? And Councillor Barnes responded that officers are always more than welcome to help to fill in, and there is also a mention that as well as it being online, it's also could be requested for a paper copy could be requested. Hopefully that has been a sum up. I think I just wanted to ask, so as Jeremy has explained, this petition could be we could either note what was mentioned by members, or we can take no action, or recommendations can be put forward by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which could be referred back to the officers. Okay. I think, Edwards, you had a recommendation to put forward, if you could.
I would like to move a recommendation, quite simply, that and I don't know whether this would be addressed to Councillor Barnes. I suspect it would, rather than Doug Wilkinson, but perhaps we can advise that. But the recommendation would be that the Phase 2 works are not proceeded with by the Council until a full and proper consultation has taken place. And that consultation should involve all the normal things, letters to residents, virtual meetings if necessary, questionnaires, and so on and so forth, and a report at the end of the process, which tries to bring together the views of the outcome of the consultation. So it's a bit wordy, but you get my drift, I'm sure. And I think a lot of the members of OSC have made similar comments, really. But it is, if we need a vote, well, we could take a vote, I suppose.
Jeremy, did you?
Yeah, I think it needs to be clear to the committee that is a request that is being made by the committee, if it is agreed, for Councillor Barnes to consider, because as I said earlier, the committee cannot make executive decisions. I think that's what Councillor Smith was seeking to do
Yes.
in his suggested proposal. In terms of what happens now, Chair, that needs to be seconded and either unanimously agreed by the committee, or if not unanimously agreed, members need to indicate whether they're for it or against it, but it needs to be seconded first.
Chair, I'm unclear as to what we're being asked. Sorry, I do need to be very clear, because my understanding from Jeremy, sorry, Chair, when we first started, was that we can either accept the position moving forward as we are, or refer it back to the officer that made a decision. Those were the two bits that my understanding. If I've got that wrong, then please clarify. And then now Councillor Smith is making another proposal, which again I think we need to be clear about before we make any decision. Thanks.
I'm happy to comment on that, Chair, if that would help. I mean,
yes,
if the matter was relating to the decision taken by Doug Wilkinson to implement the experimental traffic order, the only place that could be referred back is to Doug Wilkinson, because he made the decision. That's why that couldn't be referred to Councillor Barnes, because he wasn't the decision maker for the experimental traffic order. I do not believe that Councillor Smith is asking for that. I believe that Councillor Smith is asking that Councillor Barnes, as portfolio holder, considers not implementing the second phase of this process until such time as the consultation exercise has been completed. I'm slightly paraphrasing it, but I understand that is what Councillor Smith is asking, which is slightly different than referring something back to a decision maker. I think it's within the remit of this committee to make that decision if it is seconded and agreed, and then it would be a matter for Councillor Barnes to consider as the portfolio holder as he sees fit. So I hope that answers Councillor Greer's question and is acceptable to Councillor Smith, and Councillor Barnes is clear about what is also being suggested. But as I say, it needs to be seconded and agreed by the committee in any event.
Can I make a comment, Chair, on that?
Yes.
Just to respond, we have no idea what kind of time frame we're going to be given. The Secretary of State gave us 8 weeks to implement this. If we get a similar time frame for the second phase, then we're going to be in the same situation. But if we're given more time, yes, of course, we'd like to engage, but it just depends upon what time frame is given to us. And if we're not able to engage because the time frame is so tight yet again, then we will do a full consultation during the experimental period, which is what we've done now, allowing everyone to have their say.
Could I just amplify, not amplify, but respond to that? What I'm saying is, I understand that there's complete uncertainty about the funding for phase 2. What I'm requesting, so the committee is absolutely clear, is no matter what the Secretary of State decides to do or doesn't do, and whatever the timescale is that we do not know, that the council, or Councillor Barnes, should I say, will not take a decision on phase 2 until the consultation period is completed. That is what I'm asking.
Chair, this is completely hypothetical. Councillor Smith is asking for something that's...
Sorry, Councillor Barnes. It's just, Councillor Smith, I understand the petition has been put forward, but this is my view, just from what I'm understanding right now. We don't have, I don't think we have because you would see in the information pack, today's meeting has just been discussion based, and we don't really have on hold the consultation, the example consultation with us for us to make a comment on that. I understand there are queries on that, but I'm just quite curious as to how we can make a recommendation without having the solid base to making such a recommendation, if that makes sense. Because I haven't personally, seen the full live consultation yet, because it was not provided in the papers, as this was a petition. I'm just quite, I'm not sure if members do understand what I'm trying to get at, but it's just, I'm quite confused as to how we are going to make a recommendation without having the base to the in-depth information, if that's made sense. I think Councillor Gray, did you have a comment to make, or did I?
No, sorry, Chair. Yes, sorry. I totally agree with that. I mean, whichever way this goes, I don't know if we can put it to committee, but I won't be supporting that amendment at all, or that proposal.
Jeremy, would you suggest that we go ahead with a vote to the recommendation, because it is a recommendation that should be coming out from the committee and should be agreed either by vote, or from what I can see, it can't be unanimous because some members may refrain from voting or abstain or vote against.
I think I should give us a little bit of clarity, and I'm sorry if I gave any confusion on this matter. This is a meeting of the Scrutiny Committee to consider a petition. It is of no relevance to the decision that has been taken by Doug Wilkinson in the normal course of events for this committee. And I'll expand on that so everybody is clear. When decisions are taken by Cabinet or individual Cabinet members or officers which are key decisions, they are subject to call-in provisions, and all members of this committee are well aware of those provisions. The decision to implement the experimental traffic order was an operational officer decision. It was not a key decision, so it is outside the remit of call-in. So the reason this matter is before the committee is not to challenge or robustly interrogate a decision before the decision is implemented. The decision taken by Doug Wilkinson has been implemented. The matter is before this committee because the council's rules on petitions have different tiers for different numbers of signatures, and this one falls within the Scrutiny Committee. Ordinarily, what would happen when any petition is being considered, whether it be at council or at Scrutiny, is the petition would be debated, as it has been, having heard from the petitioner and the relevant cabinet member and senior officers, and the committee would refer the petition to officers or the cabinet member to give consideration to issues raised in the petition as part of the ongoing consultation. Now that is ultimately almost the maximum remit of the committee. I mean, the committee could, if it wished, and I'm certainly not advocating this personally before anyone thinks I am, list a series of issues they'd like the to be considered as part of the consultation in terms of, when we're considering responses. But the reality is the decision to implement the Bowes low traffic neighbourhood by experimental traffic order has been taken. It was a lawful decision. My advice was sought on it. It is now been implemented, and the required consultation during the experimental order is in place. And I think, as one of the councillors mentioned, when ultimately the consultation responses have been considered, any decision to permanently implement the scheme will of itself be a key decision in the normal course of events. So the committee needs to have, be very, very clear on what the actual proposal is here. As I say, procedurally, and I'm happy to talk about procedure all night, I'm sure you're not. Procedurally, the Councillor Smith has put forward a proposal which has yet to be seconded. Whether that proposal has any meaningful effect in terms of Councillor Bowles being able to consider it is a different matter, because it may not, it may never come into play, as has been suggested. But strictly speaking, procedurally, we have a proposal which has not been seconded.
Okay, so if I could just say, if Councillor Smith's proposal, is it seconded? I think that's where we could start off, because thereon.
Chair, sorry, could I ask Jeremy a point of procedure, if I may? I'm really sorry to interrupt you. I'm still slightly confused. Councillor Smith is going to talk about another traffic order, not this traffic order, and a completely hypothetical situation. So I don't understand how it's within the purview of this particular Overview and Scrutiny Committee to make a recommendation on a completely different traffic order.
Well, and on a hypothetical.
It's completely. I don't understand how the committee is now going to start talking about a completely different traffic order. That's what I'm confused about, Jeremy. Sorry.
Could I, perhaps I could add just some clarification? I don't know if it wasn't been said. The documentation that went out to residents about the low traffic neighbourhood scheme went into considerable detail, quite rightly, about phase 1 and phase 2. Now, phase 1 has been implemented in terms of the temporary, so there's no point referring the decision back because it's been taken, as was said. So, given that we've been discussing for the last hour and a half that there were concerns by residents, or some residents, about the consultation process, what I'm trying to achieve is to ensure that there is a proper consultation about phase 2, and that no decision on phase 2 is taken until that is carried out. That is all I'm saying.
Chair, it didn't go into great detail.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair. It didn't go into great detail about phase 2 because we do not have a plan for phase 2.
Councillor Smith, on the information that I've seen.
Councillor Smith is incorrect when he states that there is detail on phase 2 because we do not know where we're going to put the bus gate on phase 2.
I'm just sorry, Margaret. I think we just need to come to a conclusion on what method we're going to take, because I understand, Jeremy. Sorry. Yeah. If you can just clarify on what the procedure could be from now on, so we can be aware of what.
Of course.
And I understand there was a recommendation put forward, and I have not heard a seconder, so I'm just quite.
Chair, I'm happy to second that. I'm trying to wait for a break.
Just on this, Chair, before we go any further, and it may be me understanding incorrectly Councillor Smith's intention. If it is, I'm sure he will correct me with haste. When Councillor Smith is referring to phase 2, the way he was describing it, I thought he was talking about the making permanent of the experimental measures. If Councillor Smith is talking about some other future phase involving different measures in different streets, that's a different matter altogether.
He is.
but I'm not. Councillor Barnes is saying he is. I'm not sure. So perhaps Councillor Smith could clarify. When you refer to phase 2, do you mean something entirely different to this and another stage altogether involving different streets and different measures potentially, or do you mean the making permanent of the current experimental traffic orders, which is the subject of the petition?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I agree that we need further clarification. The thing is, although we've been talking about the 6-month consultation to March anyway, over and over again, I made certain assumptions about what that would include. I assumed it was about phase 2. Now, however, if that is incorrect, and it is the 6-month, which is a very long period, consultation about making temporary traffic order permanent, if that is what that means, I would, as I say, question the length of time necessary for that. Then I would have to modify my recommendation because what I suppose I would like perhaps Councillor Barnes, one of the officers, to explain what their proposal is for the consultation for the whole of for phase 2. If we're going to have 6 months consultation for the permanent order, if that's what they're saying, and then presumably there will be another 3 or 4 or 5 months consultation on top of that, which seems absurd. So perhaps if somebody could explain that, then we might take this further.
Councillor Smith, I think the questions we did have that time to ask our questions, and I'm just I think we're just I don't mean to be any offence, but I think we're just going off topic now, because the issue is the recommendation, which I understand was, as Jeremy explained, about I think you was more focused on the phase 2, and we can't really make a decision on that. But I'm just quite, I think it's time that we need to move on. And if there isn't, if the recommendation isn't amended, and if you're not withdrawing the recommendation that you've made because you cannot recommend it as it doesn't, as we can't make a decision on that, then I would ask that we either note what was discussed in this meeting and note what we received from the petition as well as from members, and it's noted, or we, I can't say we take no action because we have raised concerns, and that's my proposal. We should move on because we still have another item, and I think
you would like to speak. I think.
Yes, Councillor Giorgio. Yes.
Can I suggest that what we've been discussing is phase 1. We've not really discussed phase 2. We've acknowledged that phase 2 could take place if there is funding for it. We've acknowledged that the plan, the design that went out to residents did show a bus gate in Brownlow Road, and part of the questionnaire asks what the thoughts are on that bus gate, where it might be. But and the plans also showed a closure of Goring and Westbury, which indeed was a point I made, that the questionnaire needs to take that on board. So I hope Doug will go away and think about that one. But our discussion has mainly been around phase 1. And that's, I think, what the focus of the petition has been, although I do know that residents are concerned about phase 2 as well. And perhaps many of them did sign the petition with a view to phase 2. But I think the focus has been on phase 1. I would ask that, given that LTNs are new to us, that this is the first one that we've seen go in, and we've seen another one going into Fox Lane, and I think if there is funding, we're likely to see others going throughout the borough, across the borough, as a way of achieving the various things that officers have said. I think we should use this opportunity to learn about the implementation of this phase in Bowes. So given that this period is going to last for 6 months, I would ask that it comes back to us in 6 months' time, or at the end of that 6-month period. And I think this is a point that Richard Eason made. He said, and I quote, "The report will be subject to further scrutiny." And I think that's what we should do in 6 months' time, is actually to have a look at what we have learned, and how it's been evaluated, and indeed how to go forward. So I would ask that it comes back in 6 months' time.
Okay, Jeremy, did you?
Yeah, sorry to be procedural, Chair, and I know it's been a long meeting already, but I think Councillor Giorgio is suggesting your request is made that the matter is brought back to scrutiny after the consultation in advance of any formal decision being taken. That's what I heard in very brief summary. Now, we have a proposal which has been seconded. I believe it was proposed by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor David Sanders. I wasn't sure who seconded it. My thoughts are, in order to bring this part of the meeting to a close, if Councillor Smith and Councillor David Sanders are happy with that suggestion by Councillor Giorgio, they amend their proposal and seconding to cover that, and the committee determines whether it agrees it or not, because that is clearly within the gift of the committee to request the matter is brought back prior to any formal decision being taken at the end of the consultation. Does that help? Does it make it work?
It sort of helps. Could I just, don't want to prolong this, I'm losing the will to live, as I'm sure most of us are, but when you're talking about no decision should be taken until it's brought back to overview and scrutiny, what decision are we talking about? Decision to do what, or
Well, it would be completely wrong of me, Chair, or anybody, officer or member, to seek to predetermine a decision which is subject to ongoing consultation as we speak.
No, but
I was suggesting
the decision. I don't understand.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair. Can I intervene? A point of order. Sorry, can I have a point of order, Chair?
Yes, yes.
I'd really like us, and I know that there's procedural stuff, but I was very clear when I came to this meeting. There was a presentation on the petition. There was a presentation from the officers. There was an opportunity to ask Q&A questions, and we were given the remit that we would either accept the position, knowing that there was a consultation taking place moving forward, or we would refer it back to the officer who made the decision. There's been various proposals. I think we should come back to the remit of what this committee, scrutiny panel, can do on those particular questions that were asked, and whether we wish to move forward with that, and then we actually move on. I accept that Councillor Giorgio is part of this particular process, and we as scrutiny can ask for anything to come back to us at any point, and we know that the consultation is happening, but we go back to the original remit that was our part, so that we can then move on to the next bit. Otherwise, we will be here all night.
I agree.
Okay. Could I just say so? I'm not going to add
because I understand there's officers and members still waiting for the second item,
yes,
and they have another meeting. So can we just, because it's just becoming.
Yeah, I know. I'm just going to bring this to an end now because it's going on. We're getting wrapped up in a lot of hair splitting. I think, all things considered, I would like to stick with the proposal I made that I moved earlier on, and that we go for that. What are you saying? It's
not within the purview of this.
Okay, Jeremy, if you can just clear it out, and we can just move and move to the next step, because it's just becoming like a vicious circle. We're just going round and round.
It is, Chair. You're absolutely right. I asked a question of Councillor Smith when he talks about phase 2. Is he referring to the making permanent of any current temporary traffic order that is the subject of the petition, or is he talking about an entirely different set of roads and restrictions and whatnot? I'm still unclear. My advice to you, Chair, as monitoring officer, is there is a recommendation before you which lacks clarity and therefore legal ability to be enacted, and it should be rejected, and somebody should put something else forward. That's my advice, because I've sought to clarify this several times. There is no clarity on what the proposal actually is, even though I've asked a direct question. So I would say reject it in your capacity as chair and ask for somebody else to move something else.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeremy. I am relying on your advice, and I would say that as there is no clarity, and still ask for you that you've asked for clarity, and we haven't received that. Therefore, I would say that we reject this and we move on. If there is another proposal, we It's just I'm really,
There is another proposal, if I may say so. I accept what's been said, but the alternative proposal is the one that's just been set out by Jeremy, i.e. that we recommend to I suppose to Doug Wilkinson that the permanent traffic order is not brought into being into operation until there has been a proper consultation completed.
Okay,
I can't make it more clearer than that, thank you.
Okay, understood. I'm gonna go on. Is this seconded?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, Jeremy, can we go to vote on this recommendation? Because
yes, and I would give members complete comfort that the recommendation put forward that we don't make a final decision until there's proper consultation is entirely acceptable because the law requires us to do it anyway. So no member should have any discomfort on that recommendation as it has been put forward. It's been seconded, Chair, and I think you should say put it to the vote.
Okay, I do put it to the vote, and if we can move on, please. Thank you. And the voting process would... Claire, would you be... Hello? So how would the...
I would suggest, Chair, that you read out a list of councillors of the committee and ask if they are for, against or abstain, and Claire Johnson will make a note of them.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeremy. So what we've heard from Councillor Edward Smith on his proposal, could I ask, so I'm going to go one by councillors to ask them. So Councillor Has Yusuf, do you vote in favour, against or abstain to Councillor Edward Smith's recommendation?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Birsen Demirel, do you vote in favour, against or abstain?
I'm voting against. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edward Smith.
I'm voting for.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lee David Sanders.
I'm voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Achilles Giorgio.
Can I just be clear that the motion is that nothing is implemented until there is a full consultation? Was that right, Jeremy? Is that the motion before us?
Sorry, Councillor, I was on mute. I do apologise. The motion before you is that no permanent changes on the current Bose LTN, which is the subject of the experimental traffic order, are implemented until such time as the full and proper consultation exercise has been completed. I've slightly formalised it, Councillor Smith.
And you have advised us to say that they can't be implemented until there is a full and proper consultation anyway.
Well, the full and proper consultation exercise has begun, and we don't, as a local authority, stop them without concluding.
So therefore, the consultation is taking place now, as is being implemented, and so therefore I vote in favour.
Thank you, Councillor Giorgio. Councillor Elif Erbil. Can you say if you vote for or against or abstain? Hello, Councillor Elif Erbil. Okay, I think she's just leaving. Accidentally, I think she'll be rejoining. Okay, Councillor Margaret Greer, are you voting in favour, against, or abstaining?
Well, I'm confused. So, and I think now that you've explained again, Jeremy, that maybe some of us are confused, but I'm going to vote against because we're in a consultation already, and the full and proper consultation won't be implemented until we finish this consultation. So I don't actually understand that proposal. So,
sorry, can I just make point further as well?
Yes.
I mean, even though I voted, I'm really confused now, because if by law, statutory, we have to wait till the consultation finish, why are we taking a recommendation on which is something we're going to do anyway? So it's very confusing, I must say.
Absolutely right. We're agreeing to what is already being implemented. That's what we've been asked to do.
But there was, yes.
So I don't know why we're even doing that then.
But it's just because a recommendation.
If I can be clear, it's an entirely lawful recommendation, which I'm sure Councillor Barnes and Doug Wilkinson, as the senior officer and portfolio holder responsible for, will have absolutely no issue taking on board, because it's only a suggestion, obviously. It's a suggestion that the council is required to do. Any committee is simply asking Doug Wilkinson and Councillor Barnes to undertake the consultation in an adequate and lawful and proper manner, which I can assure you, as the council's monitoring officer, they will do anyway. It is entirely proper, and it may seem that you're asking for something you know is going to be done, but that's what Councillor Smith asked for, and that's what was seconded. So it is entirely proper.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, it's a proposal and recommendation put forward. It is out for voting. So now I carry on with the vote. Councillor Elif Erbil, do you vote in favour, against, or do you abstain from Councillor Edward Smith's proposal? Hello, Councillor Erbil. We cannot hear you. Jeremy, I can see that Councillor Elif Erbil's on, but we can't hear from her. Would it?
Can I come back then, Councillor, and actually change my thing to abstain, please? Because it's going to be implemented, so I want to do it to that, please.
Okay, that is noted.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes, I can, Councillor Elif Erbil. Can you propose? Have you heard what's been discussed? And do you know what you're voting for?
Yes, I do. I'm voting against because we need to hear more before a consultation could be made. Thank you.
I think we have got the vote for that, so that is against. So Claire, if I'm...
Sorry, can you confirm, Elif Erbil, what
she said against.
Against.
Okay. So we have...
Can I just... as there was more clarification, sorry about that. As there were more clarification, I'm going to abstain as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Abstain. So we have 3 abstentions, 1 against, and 3 in favour. And myself, of course, I would need to vote as well. I'm going to abstain as well, as I think we do need more clarity, and I don't want to vote in favour or against, so I'm just abstaining. And
so that is carried, Chair. 3 votes to 1.
Okay.
So the decision of the committee is to request that Doug Wilkinson and Councillor Barnes implement no permanent solution to the Bowslow traffic neighbourhood until such time as a full and proper consultation exercise has been completed. I would move on to the next item of business, Chair.
Okay. And we have ended this item. Thank you very much. We have had our votes, and as Jeremy has said, it has moved on.